Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today. I'm Jamie, that's Dave, that's Adam. We go through our lineups, and we play in a lot of leagues, and we look at players, and we say, oh, this guy, I got to start him because I drafted him in a certain spot, or you don't want to have FOMO, fear of missing out, or, oh, this will be the week. Mike Evans is going to stiff-arm Marshawn Lattimore like DK Metcalf did and run for 84 yards and score a touchdown, even though Lattimore has locked him up every time. We'll talk about that guy coming up in a second. But you might look at your lineups and say, okay, I got to start this guy, but I don't necessarily love it, and that's why we called the segment Like Him, Don't Love Him. And let's start with this one, Antonio Gibson. I loved Antonio Gibson coming into the season. I still have high hopes for him, but he's dealing with a shin injury, a calf injury, got a hairline fracture in his shin. He's practicing on a limited basis, but apparently looking okay. The matchup is as dreamy as you will find against a Broncos defense that has completely fallen apart against the run. Exhibit A, Dearness Johnson, is still running for touchdowns and yards against them from last Thursday night. So do we trust Antonio Gibson? I am starting him in all the leagues. I drafted him, clearly. But, Dave, are you confident in Antonio Gibson, or are you nervous about Antonio Gibson?
I am nervous about Antonio Gibson, but I'm going to start him anyway. The thing that I'm really nervous about is what happens if the Denver Broncos have a lead on Washington in this game. It could happen, and does that mean that Antonio Gibson won't even be on the field to put up numbers? We've taken a look at this. According to Pro Football Focus, Gibson has played on 16, quote, pass very likely snaps. That means likely that the team is going to throw the football. Maybe they're down by 2 scores. It could also mean like a 3rd and 12 type of down in the first half. Compare that to 82 for J.D. McKissic. It's pretty clear he's not a workhorse running back. So that's strike number 1. Strike number 2 is that he's banged up. He's not 100% healthy. And strike number 3 is that he needs to score touchdowns in order to be good. I don't know if he can do what James Conner did, but I'll know that he'll get more work than James Conner got. So I'm okay starting him as a low-end number 2 fantasy running back this week, especially against Denver, who's trying to find their run defense right now. They're trading for linebackers like crazy.
Yeah, they added Kenny Young from the Rams. They're down, 3 linebackers they were expecting to count on, and they just lost Micah Kaiser last week in that game against the Browns, and so just getting worse by the second. But again, hopefully Kenny Young can help them, but we would like to see them struggle one more time to let Antonio Gibson have a big game. All right, Dave, so a guy that you're concerned about a little bit is Chuba Hubbard. So he's done a good job, not a great job, had some good moments taking over for Christian McCaffrey. Going to start for him one more time, taking on the Falcons. So what do you like and not necessarily love about Hubbard this week?
Well, I like what he's done. He's been productive in a bunch of games lately, replacing Christian McCaffrey. But before last week's game, Matt Rule comes out and says, we're going to get back to running the football. And they did, but they also used Royce Freeman. Hubbard played 55% of the snaps, and he started losing first half snaps to Royce Freeman last week. But the real issue, an even bigger issue with Chuba Hubbard, is that offensive line is keeping him from busting out big plays, and now he's taking on the Falcons. And this is a weird matchup, believe it or not. Atlanta is second best in the league in yards after contact per rush allowed, just 2.24. So they're good at wrapping up running backs. The problem is that they're 3rd worst in allowing yards before contact per rush. But if that offensive line isn't opening up lanes for Chuba Hubbard, who's losing playing time to Royce Freeman, I don't think it's going to matter. So I like Antonio Gibson, for example, way better than Chuba Hubbard this week. Hubbard does have 4 catches or more in 2 of his last 3 games. We need a little bit more of that, and I'm not sure we're going to get it from the Panthers.
Yeah, I'm very nervous to start Chuba Hubbard. I started him over Chase Edmonds, and given the amount of touches that Edmonds had, I don't regret it. Given the touchdown that Edmonds scored, I probably will regret it. But that's why you start Hubbard, because you have a guaranteed role. At least you think you're going to get probably 14 to 20 touches, something like that. And against Atlanta, that's a really good thing. As long as he gets the workload, I think he'll end up giving you RB2 numbers. But you're not super excited about it because he hasn't really been that efficient. The Falcons' run defense, Dave just touched on it. They give up points in fantasy, but they're not a terrible run defense here. And the other thing is, watching them last week against the Giants, they got manhandled. I know this is a slightly different stat, but they got 6 sacks to the Giants because their offensive line is just so bad, as Dave already alluded to. So I agree with everything there. I'm starting him because I'm forced to, not because I'm excited about it.
All right, so we'll see how Chuba Hubbard does. Again, the hope would be the work is there for him and that he comes through in this matchup against Atlanta. Adam, a guy that you like but don't love is Elijah Mitchell, who has clearly taken over as the 49ers' main running back. But I think the thing I know you don't love about him is his lack of work in the passing game. So taking on a Bears defense that might be down Akeem Hicks, down Khalil Mack, can he take advantage of it to the extent that fantasy managers will love him this week?
It's all about the touchdown, because if he doesn't score a touchdown, at best, you're probably talking 8 to 10 PPR fantasy points, which is really not that good. So I'm starting him because I think he will score a touchdown. That's kind of what the 49ers do. But if he doesn't score, you know what you're looking at in full PPR. 9 or half, he's an easy start, though.
Yep, he's had 3 games this season with at least 17 or more carries. He's got you 100 yards and a touchdown in 2 of them. The one that he didn't was the Week 2 game against Philadelphia when he hurt his shoulder, came back into the game. So we'll see if he's able to take advantage of this matchup. Hopefully, we don't see too much to Michael Hasty, who did have, I think it was 3 catches last week in their win against in their loss, against the Colts. And we know Trey Sermon not going to be a factor, so that's a good thing working in Elijah Mitchell's favor. Next guy we're going to talk about here is Michael Carter, and we saw in the game with Mike White when he took over for Zach Wilson last week against the Patriots, the catches were definitely up because Mike White scared and wants to dump off the ball. Had 8 catches on 9 targets in that game for Michael Carter. He also benefited without Tevin Coleman. Coleman's not going to play in this game, but we are still talking about a Jets offense taking on a very good Bengals defense that is going to be in a situation without their number 1 quarterback, Zach Wilson not playing, Mike White starting again, without their number 1 wide receiver, Corey Davis is out, and this Bengals defense has been really good against opposing running backs. So I like Michael Carter in PPR as a flex, low-end starter, but I'm concerned about him living up to probably Heath's expectations as a guy that we might be chasing points based on last week. So Dave, you obviously share some of the same sentiment as I do in regards to Michael Carter. Is he somebody you would try to steer away from or maybe start this week?
I would try and steer away from Michael Carter because I'm not sure how much of what happened last week is repeatable. And you talked about Mike White being scared. White did also throw downfield, but it was to Corey Davis last week. Just how much is he going to continue to lean on these running backs like he did in week number 7? My guess is that the targets and the catches come down a little bit for Mike Carter, and that's bad news. He's also been terrible running the football, under 4 yards per carry in 4 straight games. What happens if he gets 5 targets and he doesn't score a touchdown? Now you're talking about numbers that Adam was thinking for Chuba Hubbard or for Elijah Mitchell. It could be worse than that for Michael Carter. The only saving grace, and this is the only reason why I still have him ranked where I have him ranked, is that the Bengals have allowed a touchdown to a running back in 4 straight games. Maybe this is the guy that scores in short yardage if the Jets somehow, some way find their way there.
He has a touchdown or 100 yards, 100 total yards in 3 straight games. And for what it's worth, I know a lot of it is inflated because of the Najee Harris game, but they've given up a lot of receptions to running backs as a team over the course of the season. Add one note before we move on. This is fascinating from Brian Costello, who covers the Jets for the New York Post. Mike White will be the 36th different starting quarterback for the Jets since Joe Namath left town in 1976. 36 different quarterbacks that they've had to use.
So what? That's half as many as the Dolphins have started since Dan Marino.
It's still pretty impressive, though, that he's actually the 13th different starting quarterback in terms of Mike White since 2012, 9th since 2016. So a franchise that is still looking to find an answer at the quarterback position. All right, Adam, so we talked about this at the start of the segment. Mike Evans, this is maybe the poster child for this segment because he's coming off a 3-touchdown game. It's almost impossible to bench him, but the history against Marshawn Lattimore is not exactly pretty.
No, it's really bad. Based on the Lattimore era, the 8 games that Mike Evans has played against the Saints, he has 1 game with more than 12 PPR fantasy points. I mean, he has some horrible, horrible games. We've seen Lattimore do a really good job against him. I don't know why. I'm just more optimistic. This is arguably the best offense in football. You won't have Antonio Brown, so you'll get more targets to Mike Evans. You saw just this obsession that Tom Brady has with getting Mike Evans in the end zone. Well, maybe he's mad at him for giving away that football, but as long as he's not, I still have confidence in Evans. I think he'll buck the trend, and I am starting him, but I'm not playing him in DFS, I'll tell you that.
I'm nervous about him. Adam, the stat that you gave were 7 of his last 8 games, 12 or fewer PPR points. That resonated with me. And when you think about Marshawn Lattimore, last year, he was terrible. He had one of the worst grades among starting cornerbacks in Pro Football Focus. This year, one of the better grades. He's playing better in 2021, and I think it's going to hurt Mike Evans. I don't want to trust him as anything more than a low-end number 2 fantasy receiver.
All right, so we'll see what happens. Again, very difficult to get away from Mike Evans because, as we saw, it takes 1 play against a great cornerback. DK Metcalf showed us last week against Lattimore. But again, only 2 catches in that game. Lattimore is great at what he does. So is Evans. But these 2 guys like to go at it. And probably a good idea to avoid Evans in DFS, as you said, Adam. Let's talk about Robert Woods, Dave, because we know the targets haven't exactly been there for him. The matchup is great against the Texans. They're not going to slow down this Rams offense. But Woods clearly is not the number one focal point of this passing game. That's Cooper Kupp. And we see Tyler Higbee starting to see a spike in targets as well. You know, they'll run the ball. So can you trust Robert Woods to the same extent that we thought going into the season, even over the last couple of weeks?
Well, remember that game against Seattle where he had 14 targets, 12 catches, 150 yards. Since that game, 11 targets, 8 catches, and 101 receiving yards. So we're right back where we were with Robert Woods. And at this point, I think we look at him and say, okay, can he score a touchdown? And if he can he still somehow find 15 PPR fantasy points? And it's getting a little bit harder and harder each week. Now, you're going to take on this matchup against Houston. Yeah, their defense is terrible, but that should mean that LA is going to be able to roll in there and do whatever they want. That means like 30 PPR points for Cooper Kupp, and it should mean a bounce-back game for the running backs for LA. So I'm nervous about Robert Woods this week. I've got a tough call to make. Listen to this. I started the year feeling so good about my receivers. I had Mike Evans and Robert Woods. Now I got to start one of those guys because I can put Cordero Patterson in my wide receiver spot. Which one am I going to go with? I'm kind of leaning toward Evans, believe it or not.
Don't blame you, just based on what Robert Woods has been. Hopefully he scores because that's been saving him a little bit over the last several weeks. But you know what we need? We just need Sean McVay to say, Robert Woods, we know you need the ball. We know we're going to get you the ball. It's your time to get the ball. And then he gets that big game like we saw against the Seahawks. Let's stay in that same game, Adam. Brandon Cooks. The news is Davis Mills, the starting quarterback for the Texans. No Tyrod Taylor again. Not an easy matchup against the Rams. Is a revenge game. He's not happy seeing his buddy Mark Ingram get traded. If you saw what he tweeted, we can't repeat that. But in any event, he's not a happy camper with his team. So can he have some success fantasy-wise that managers can trust him?
If he scores a touchdown on Sunday, I will dress up as some crazy character and go around ringing doorbells and asking for candy, okay? I'll do something crazy.
Not Halloween.
Oh, yeah. No, I'll do it. So anyway, listen, he's not performing. 3 of the last 4 games, he has been terrible. I am actually taking this time to call the 2 of you out. You're way too high on Brandon Cooks. Learn your lesson. He should be in the 40s. I started Randall Cobb over him last night, and cha-ching, I'm going to win that little battle with myself, I guess. Brandon Cooks should not be started. I am very low on him. It's not like him or don't love him. It's don't like him at all this week.
All right, so we'll see if Brandon Cooks delivers. Dave, you're the high guy.
Yeah,
Why so confident?
I'm just hoping that he gets double-digit targets and catches again. And I have him ranked as if Tyrod Taylor is the quarterback for Houston. Now that it doesn't look that way,
I do too. To be honest.
That 17 is going to come down quite a bit. So now you can look at, and this is a great graphic to show. Easy to say Cortland Sutton ahead of Brandon Cooks. Easy to say DK Metcalf. Robert Woods, is it really that easy to say? I don't know about that. But Claypool, Emmanuel Sanders, I think you can even make the case for Devontae Smith and Marvin Jones as well. All those guys ahead of Brandon Cooks in full PPR.
Yeah, they are for me as well. So we'll see if Cooks comes out with a strong performance. Again, it's difficult to bench him because he's one of those guys that it's one play, but the quarterback play is bad. The matchup is tough. You know the Rams will do everything they can to take him away, and unfortunately it could be another rough outing for him. We'd love to see Tyrod Taylor back at this point come Week 9. All right, last guy we're going to talk about here, Julio Jones. Again, at this point we expect him to play, so just keep that in mind because obviously if he doesn't, we're not even going to like him. We're going to have to keep him on our bench. But he's expected to be out there, Dave, dealing with this hamstring injury. Obviously the production's not been there. Once again, no touchdowns. So is it even a like for Julio Jones?
I mean, it's barely. It's a like because I know once upon a time I started Julio Jones in fantasy and he helped me win a championship. Like, that's really about it. Like, he doesn't even have as many targets as Robert Woods has in the last 2 weeks. 9 targets, 5 catches, 97 yards, no touchdowns. What are we doing with Julio Jones at this point? It's silly. He's not even a top 30 fantasy receiver.
All right, Adam, take the positive approach. Can Julio Jones deliver in this matchup against the Colts? And we're getting reports in regards to T.Y. Hilton as well, but this is as healthy as they're going to be on the defensive side as well, so they're getting better on that side of the ball with guys coming back.
Yeah, but it's still a really good matchup, and that's why it's so enticing, and this could be the game of the week. I mean, you could see a lot of throwing here, could hopefully see a high-scoring game. I'm sitting Julio Jones. I would start him over Brandon Cooks, but if you want to get excited about Julio Jones, he did help Dave win a championship once upon a time, and he is Julio Jones. He had a great game in Week 2. He hasn't played that many games, and the matchup is really enticing as well.
All right, so we'll see how Julio Jones does. Again, just to recap some of the guys we talked about here, the running backs, Antonio Gibson, Chuba Hubbard, Elijah Mitchell, Michael Carter. Might have to start these guys. In some cases, we like them because of the matchup. Other cases, we might not even like them based on the situations. The wide receivers, Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks, Julio Jones, and Robert Woods. You can see where we have them ranked on CBSSports.com, and we'll talk about these guys, I'm sure, on Sunday for CBS Sports HQ and Fantasy Football Today, our show at 10 a.m. Eastern.